Um, Welcome to Maximum PhpStorm. I have given this talk 2 other times, and so this was my opportunity to blow up everything I've done previously and to see if I can add new thoughts, new ideas. Let me just warm up a little bit here. My name is Chris Weber. I am a software engineer for the Nerdery. We're based out of the Twin Cities. We're also in Chicago, Kansas City, and Phoenix. I am a PhpStorm enthusiast, and if you find anybody from the Twin Cities and you ask them, tell me one thing you know about Chris Weber, it's that I will not shut up about PhpStorm. I have been known to bring this up at parties. I just can't stop talking about it. I'm also been on Drupal.org for a decent time. I'm cosmicdreams. Let me get to know a little bit about you. How many people code things? Yeah, that's good. I kind of expected that out of this audience. Front-end things? Yeah. All the things? Yeah. What really got me thinking about this talk, screw the notes, is thinking about my father-in-law. He's a farmer. He lives in northern Iowa, and every time we have ever had a mechanical problem, car, bicycle, anything mechanical, he was our go-to guy to fix it. He has a garage filled with specifically Stanley tools that he uses to fix absolutely everything, his tractors, cars, whatever. And when I was graduating college, my college roommates was also graduating, getting into drafting. They also were very specifically knowing absolutely everything there is to know about CAD, and being able to have that inner chop talk about CAD. I never understood anything, but it was very clear to me that when you start diving into the nerdiness of being really great at something, you become nerdy about your tools, and the constant banter you can have about which tool is better is clearly a sign that you're starting to dive in deeper. As developers, we of course do the same thing. And just let me remind you, you are attending a talk called Maximum PhpStorm, but I will not at any point begrudge you for using a tool that is not PhpStorm. If you love your tool, I am very happy about that. I also love VS Code. I've never really used Atom, but I've known a lot of people that love Atom. I started using Sublime Text, and I still have a strong fondness for Sublime Text. What I'm hopefully going to show you today is what you can benefit from diving really deep into your tool and trying to learn it fully so that you can start giving yourself a superpower when it comes to those stressful moments when the project needs you to solve that problem now. I love PhpStorm, and I've been using it for longer than my son is born, more than 7 years. I came to it at a time when I was not even a PHP developer. When I was, I forgot to mention, these are the folks who come to DrupalCon. These are the people who actually have worked on the Drupal extension, the Behat testing framework. If you want to thank anybody after this talk, please thank them. They're wonderful people. When I was an early junior developer, I was a .NET developer, and Visual Studio is the only tool you use. It's monstrous. It's gigantic. There are so much in there that if you're just starting out in development, it's scary. But there also provides you a set of things that you can rely on, like if you're working with .NET code, you can pretty much always have a debugger working for you because it's their tool, their code. Don't have to worry about the incompatibilities of framework and tool. And when I became proficient in .NET code and I wanted to try to leverage the skills I was learning there into my love of Drupal. I was forced to use tools like Eclipse or things that didn't provide the same level of tool sets that Visual Studio provides. And it was just really frustrating how I could feel so capable and powerful in .NET, but even though I gained those skills, I couldn't transfer those skills to PHP programming. That's why I love PhpStorm, because I guess this could be taken in a negative way. It was the first tool when I was writing PHP that felt like Visual Studio. So today, what we're going to do is go through some of those same levels. The levels of things that you learn along the way when you adopt a big tool like PhpStorm. The skills of discovery, learning how to discover things about your code. Things that reduce the frustration and make you feel more comfortable using the tool. Skills that help you solve problems by diving into getting more information about what's going on at the appropriate moment. And then finally, making sure that you do not have to adapt to the tool, that the tool can adapt to you. Also, as we go, please have questions. There's definitely a section at the end where we can go through any weird thing that you've ever experienced with it. And there's also kind of like a little show and tell I'm going to do at the end that I just planned on doing today. We'll see how that goes. So, first off, discovering your code. A large tool like PhpStorm is very memory intensive. It does a lot of work. It scans every bit about your code. But all of that work was for the purpose of finding out as much as it can about your code so that it could provide you answers quickly. It's kind of like a map for when you're diving into a deep dungeon. One of the cornerstones of every tool, Sublime Text, VS Code, is the ability to provide IntelliSense. It is just a common expectation that we have had for almost a decade, that any good tool will be able to index all the methods, every little thing about your code, and provide you that information when you need it. Here I was putting my cursor at the address to see what variables were available from the entity. And yeah, like I said, it's a common expectation. This is like bare bones. You absolutely have to have this, because if you didn't have it, you would have to get back to the era where you have a bookshelf next to your desk and you have just like an entire suite of reference manuals. Do we ever want to get back to the point where we open a book to reference an API? No. PhpStorm is quite famous for flipping this a little bit by providing you the Shift-Shift keyboard combination. Shift-Shift will search everything, everywhere. Any method, any file, any class that it knows about, you can be able to search for in one place because maybe you don't know the name of the thing, but you just know part of the name of the thing that matters. In addition, it allows you to search its internal actions for things that are really important, like its key map or executing the gulp build tools. Anything that PhpStorm can do by clicking on a menu item can also be available through search. And it's super awesome. There we are. If you know what kind of thing you're searching for, you can, of course, search for just that specific kind of thing. In the newest PhpStorm interface, it has this like tabbed view where you can start searching and then select. But if you just want to search for classes, you could just jump to the keyboard shortcut for classes. By the way, the icon here is supposed to show that the keyboard shortcuts with the Windows icon and the Linux icon is the same. Okay. I'm a 20-year Window user that's been forced onto a Mac. So in case there are any other Windows users out here, I'm here for you, okay? You don't feel like you have to be forced onto Macs, like I was. One of the new things I've been able to find out about PhpStorm is parameter hits. If you have like a method that has arguments and you want to know like what kind of argument this is, You could have, of course, like gone to the definition of that, but if you just want to know what the type of the argument is, you can press Command P or Control P in order to find that information right away without having to like jump needlessly into that. Go to definition is a really great tool that a lot of tools have, including Sublime Text now, where if, let's see if this works. Yay, bandwidth. No bandwidth? No bandwidth. One last time. Okay. That's not working like I want it to. Well, go to definition is there in order to allow you to find some kind of an object, some kind of variable, some kind of method that is being used somewhere in your code, but you want to see like where is it defined, what is all the documentation for that you can jump to. Go to definition is used for that. Find usages is the reverse, where you have the definition of that method, that variable, that thing within the system. Let's see, please work. Make me look cool. Come on. Okay, I'm sorry. I will put the links for all these videos in the comments for the post. Just take my word for it. Find usages will allow you to show you everywhere where that variable, that method, that object is used throughout your code. And sometimes it's a big list of things. This is great for when you're trying to do a refactoring on a method, where you want to like change part of the method, but you want to be sure about all the places where your code is going to make an impact. Find usages is a really important command to have in your repertoire. Okay, those were some ways to discover code. This section tends to be my favorite section to talk about, the things that make your life better, the frustration and time savers. When, like I said, when you were having a project that you have to solve, the last thing you want to try to solve it as quickly as possible. You're already stressed out, so these things really help. Clean up code is one of my favorite things to do when I'm taking over somebody's code. You can reformat the code of a page by using the handy reformatter that they provide. You can press Shift, Command L, and that will do things like check to see if you've got needlessly added uses, if you've got the indentation for things proper. It's good to double check to see what it has done in order to make sure if it really is compliant, because there are a few cases where it doesn't do a good job. Clipboard history is something I can't believe isn't in every program. The concept is that you can add multiple things to your clipboard and access them. You can add up to 7 things into your clipboard by default, but that is a configurable value, so if you want to keep a ton of things on your clipboard, feel free. This is great for if you're manually fixing code, where it's like you have one thing on your clipboard and then you're fixing that up, but oh, here you see that another problem along the way, so you copy that to the clipboard, but you totally erased what you previously had. It's super awesome. You can, of course, update a doc block. If you're adding a new argument to a method, you can press Command Enter or Option Enter, and then it'll automatically add that new argument as a parameter to your doc block. That's super good. You can make sure that your code is compliant with Drupal's coding standards. One of the most obvious ways of doing that is make sure that your project is using the Drupal extension. It does a number of things for you, including if your project is just working on a module, you don't have to include all the Drupal into your project. You can just include it through the Drupal extension, just as PHP includes. You could also make sure that you're using the proper Drupal coding standards, because why would you need more than 2 spaces? a lot of the PSR code standard uses for. That's completely needless. So it does a number of great things for you. That's the most obvious thing. You can also do a little bit of research yourself by making sure that you can access the Drupal API online. This will automatically open a web page of the Drupal API to see the full documentation of a specific method or object or anything a part of the Drupal API. That is helpful at times. But one of the things I love the best is that you can configure PhpStorm to use PHP Code Sniffer and other passive code scans, so that as you're viewing your code, you can get a visual indication about what code is currently violating code standards. This bit of the part of the array has too big of an indentation, and so it's telling you that you need to fix that. And if you look at the gutter over on the right, you see all the parts of your code that has some kind of a warning, some kind of thing that needs your attention. Maybe it's a red herring, you don't actually have to fix it, but PhpStorm thought you did, and you should take a look at it. When you've got your passive code scans set up properly, one of the things that's really great to do when you're modifying a specific file is to run all the code scans on that one file. So it's a good way to answer the question, am I done yet? You can press Shift Option I while you're editing that one file, and then it will automatically generate all the warnings and all the errors that it finds in a nice big list. So you're able to go down the list, fix everyone you care about, and then you're done. Once you have solved your problem. This is what you should do to be nice to your teammates, the people on your sprint team. And I just had to add this in because I remember working with a programmer who would not use any program without scratch pads. Scratch pads are a temporary file that is not actually included into your project, but you can copy and paste whatever junk you find on the internet in there and have the full tool to reformat that file and to rearrange the code. Maybe you're copying in a giant text file, you want to convert that into a JSON file, something like that. But you never want to accidentally commit that into your project. That's what scratch pads are for. And they're really great. And then if you grew up in the era of Emacs like I did, there is a compulsion to, when you have a tool that you love using, to never want to ever leave it. That's why PhpStorm allows you to do things like, reduce the complexity of handling Git. It provides a nice Git log of all the commits that it found in your project. It provides tools like having a three-way diff of whenever you're trying to compare the difference of a commit with yours. Or it handles the complexity of complex operations like a git rebase. But the thing that's really great is to be able to just look at the list of things that you've currently modified and then compare that to what it was, compare that to another branch, compare that to an arbitrary file not even included into your project. I really wish I could show you this video, but it probably isn't going to work. More time for the end when we jump into fixing a Drupal module. It also provides a terminal. The terminal is just a regular command prompt. And are there any Windows users out there at all? Anybody? Yes? Yes, so terminal is something near and dear to our heart because we cannot rely on command prompt, the default command prompt that Microsoft provides. And so the thing that I loved about PhpStorm initially when I was still on a Windows machine was the fact that you could configure PhpStorm's terminal to use a third-party terminal, one that was used proper POSIX file systems. So that's really great. You can right there in your PhpStorm not have to work with command prompt. Outside of PhpStorm, have to deal with command prompt. That's a reason to stay in PhpStorm. But you get the full terminal. You can SSH into your virtual machine. You can spin up your Docker instance, everything that you would normally do in a terminal, right there in PhpStorm. I'm not sure if I added this as a slide, but PhpStorm is also capable of knowing that you've got a gulp or grunt front-end build file included into your project and shows you all the front-end build tasks that are in them. So if you weren't a front-end developer and not like using some other process and you just wanted to like rebuild the styles because they set up everything perfectly for you, you could just double-click on the style thing and rebuild the styles. Not have to deal with a half-hour explanation about how to get the front-end build system working. Oh, I did add a slide for that. One of the things that I recently discovered about PhpStorm was the favorites panel. As you're working through code, chances are you're going to find a number of different places where you think problems are having. And you put breakpoints down for you in order to inspect all of those. And that's what we're seeing on this picture here, that there were 2 breakpoints in these 2 files that I was looking into. But you can add arbitrary files that you know are going to have problems over time. And you can have that be in your favorite list. So you can keep track of those and jump to those whenever you feel like. You don't have to worry about what tabs you have open. Just jump to the file. Okay, digital detective work. This is where the skills of, this is where the tool really helps you shift from being a developer that feels uneasy and nervous about your code to one where you can start the process of solving difficult problems. And the name of the game for all tools is to make sure that you can debug your code effectively. And as I mentioned, this was the reason why I started using PhpStorm in the first place. Using things like Eclipse, it was insanely difficult to actually get a debugger working. But PhpStorm provided a number of helpers that helped me get there. PhpStorm says that they have 0 configuration capability of getting your debugger working, which isn't always true. The idea that they say is that all you have to do is pick up the phone, this icon that looks like a bug and a phone, and then over in your browser, load one of these extensions, the Xdebug Helper or Xdebug Helper for Firefox, and make that button become green, and then everything's just going to work. But there are many reasons why it wouldn't. Perhaps you're using a virtual machine. Perhaps the code is organized in such a way that it's not all in one folder. So let's just quickly go through a number of things that you can do in order to make sure your debugger is working properly. First of all, make sure that your PHP knows that it has Xdebug capabilities. Here was an instance where I was trying to figure out why I couldn't get my debugger working, and then all I had to do was pay attention to the right-hand side of this where it says debugger not installed. Sometimes it's the simplest things. And here was an instance where I had previously set up a virtual machine to work with Xdebug, but for whatever reason, that was flipped off. You know, sometimes the rug gets pulled out from underneath you. Also, if you think that you've got your Xdebug set up properly, but it's still not breaking on anything, you can jump into your run menu and make sure that you select that all scripts should break out the first line, break in the bootstrap. Because if it's not breaking there, then something is fundamentally wrong about how the tool is talking to the debugger. Once you get a little bit further, you can start just making sure that you add additional breakpoints. Maybe there's something about your code that makes that part of the code not able to be executed. Like there's a condition that prevents the code from flowing to that condition. It looks like I missed a slide here showing the PhpStorm's web debug evaluator. I don't think that's the name of it, but you can give the tool a URL of your website that you're trying to debug, and then it will try to see if your Xdebug configuration is working properly. I'll go that when we jump back to the tool. Stay tuned for that. And then finally, what this slide was supposed to show was that you can add in a literal Xdebug_break into your code outside of the context of the tool trying to tell Xdebug to break. You can have the code tell Xdebug to break. And if it's not listening to that point, then you really have to start looking at how the tool is speaking with Xdebug properly. Something has fundamentally gone wrong. Sometimes it's the data. Sometimes the problem happens between the Drupal interpreting the data in the database and the data itself. So in order to exclude the possibility that something has saved the data wrong or something is wrong with the data, it's important to access PhpStorm's database tools. I love the database console. I used to work as a database developer. And back then, all of my pull requests, we didn't have pull requests back then, but let's just call them that, were rejected all the time because I was constantly violating code standards. One of the great things about PhpStorm is that it formats even your queries based upon a rule set to make sure that your queries have a common code format. PhpStorm is capable of accessing a number of different kinds of databases. And even in situations where you're using a virtual machine or a Docker instance, it provides some help. The first thing to do is to make sure that you connect to your virtual machine or your Docker instance. The SSH connection is usually good enough for that. Here I'm trying to connect to a virtual machine using Vagrant. And one thing I made a note to point out here is that the way this magic thing works is if you use the private key the virtual machine generates. I don't know if anyone else has used the BLT, build and load tools that Awkware provides, but I always have to point this out to people who are having trouble connecting to the database. But once you connect into your virtual machine or your Docker instance, then you just need to connect to the database, which in many cases is the insecure connection. And then once you have that working, I would have loved to be able to show this video. Please, no.
I'm running a hotspot. Do you want to just connect real quick?
I'm connected to the Wi-Fi.
I think they blocked video.
What?
Yeah, so if you want to get to the Wi-Fi, you should be able to play those. You want to try?
Instead of doing that, we're going to have to, I have more time to jump into the tool to do the special thing I was going to do. We'll go over a number of things. But what this was going to show you was that it's exactly how you would write a query. The fact that when you're writing queries, there, too, it uses IntelliSense. It knows all the tables, all the fields in the tables. So if you just know a little bit about what you want, if you want to try to tinker until you get the query right, it provides you IntelliSense to help you with that. It shows you also a nice little section of the page of the results. And you could even do things you probably shouldn't ever do, like directly change the data and then push that data back up. Sometimes when you're working on a new module and you've got like custom install hooks you're trying to do and it accidentally ran through all the install hooks, you want to get them to run again, you have to do things like that, like make sure that the config table knows that the right level of updates to run. So it's extremely helpful on specific times. So let's put it all together. One of the things I really wanted to show you is a couple of tricks. And my new favorite thing to do when I'm trying to find a way to contribute back to Drupal. This is a super simple thing that everybody in this room can do. I went to the Drupal modules Twitter today and found that there was a module that was recently released called Random Reference Formatter. And we're going to open it. Can anyone see this okay? It's pretty large. Good. So this is a project I've never opened before. And PhpStorm recognized that this is a Drupal project. And one of the things that it provides you is to enable the Drupal support. I'm going to do that. I actually have a version of Drupal installed also in the open source folder. And it's Drupal 8.5. which isn't really 8.5 anymore. So you tell it where your Drupal is, and you would do this if you're working with just a module file. If you've got a full project that has full Drupal, you just open that folder. That's fine. You tell it what version of Drupal. Okay, it does a number of things for you, like including the core modules and vendor folder. One of the things that it kind of hides that it wants you to do is also set the Drupal style formatting. So you just say set, and now you've got the Drupal formatting standards. So what I love to do is to analyze this module to see how many of the Drupal coding formatting standards it violates. So let's do that. First, we need to set up the Drupal code sniffer. Here in the preferences, you can just search for any preference you're looking for. In this case, code sniffer. So I'll just search for sniff. And inspections, by default, it's turned off. So you can turn that on. And because we have the coder module installed, it automatically recognizes that it has the Drupal and Drupal practice coding standards. The problem is, we don't want to use one of them. We want to use them both. PhpStorm currently doesn't support that, but you can trick it on how to use both standards, and I'm going to show you how. I like to make sure that the code standards are displayed by name, and then just select the other one. In this case, Drupal practice, and then click OK. That created a file that we're going to modify. So I'm going to open the terminal. You can press Option F12 in order to open the terminal. And we're going to edit in the idea folder where all the configuration is stored. There's going to be a folder called inspection profiles. And in there is just one file, project default.xml, that we just created. And then we see in the configuration that there is this setting for the coding standard, and it is set to the one that we gave it, Drupal practice. So we're just going to modify that by hand into Drupal, comma, Drupal practice, no space. Write that down, no space. And then we save that. You can tell it to refresh the settings, which for some reason is super important, so that we can go back into inspections and we see that it's now set to Drupal, comma, Drupal practice. And that's important because remember, you can run your inspections on your entire project or a specific file. Here we're going to run the code sniffer validation on the entire project and see what fun we have in store for us. Now, this could very well be a perfect project that has no code formatting standards. Anybody want to guess how many we find? Okay. Just think of the number in your head. You don't have to say it out loud. Oh, wow, only 5. Way to go. So when you run the code sniffer, let's get more of this on the screen. You get a nice little explanation about which exactly is going wrong. Over here on the right, you get the little snippet of exactly what the problem area is. Looks like they were executing, they could have injected this instead. It's a very common problem of in formatting. Let's see what's going on in context. So this is a controller which extends controller base, but if I remember correctly, it can be an injectable controller, but they're really not making that effort. Whenever I'm committing this kind of a patch to users, I typically don't try to inject things that could be injected because, maybe they had a good reason. And usually that leads to a lot of conversation about the intent of the author. But simple things like spaces, that can be fixed easily. It should be 6. There we go. Now it's 6. And that error was probably the same thing. Yeah. And then here's another one, another injected thing. Sometimes they are already injecting things, and then I feel like it's comfortable to inject a new thing. They want the language manager? Huh. Okay. Well, for the purpose of this talk, I won't slay that beast. But there you go. There's a project. That's what I wanted to show you. So, final section. Thank you for taking this journey. How to adapt the tool to you. Maybe instead of showing these videos that don't show, I'll jump back. One of the things that I love about PhpStorm is the fact that you are in command of every keyboard shortcut. There are things that PhpStorm does that it doesn't have keyboard shortcuts for. Keyboard shortcuts make the tool faster to use. And whenever you want to create your own shortcut, you can just access the key map. And again, you can find any setting just by searching for it. So here in the key map, there are a lot of different ways where you can close tabs. And I wanted to be able to control all but the pinned tabs, or just all the tabs. Whenever you want to do like the Chrome style close all the tabs to the right, for example, you could just double click on that thing and then add a keyboard shortcut to it. And then as you're trying to figure out like what keyboard shortcut can you possibly use, hey, look, that one's open. If you accessed one that something else is used, it will tell you that you would be taking that keyboard shortcut away from something. And let's add that one. And then this is helpful if you know the action and you want to look up what the keyboard shortcut for that is. But most of the time what happens is that you're just working around the computer, working around the tool, and you do an action with the mouse that actually had a keyboard shortcut for, and you didn't know that it actually had a keyboard shortcut. For that, there is a plugin called Key Promoter. It is the most annoyingly helpful plugin I have ever used. It will prompt your screen for 7 seconds whenever you take an action with the mouse that you could have done with the keyboard, and it will tell you what the keyboard shortcut for that action was. And 7 seconds is, I don't know if they mathematically or like did user experience studies on this or anything, but that's enough time for you to just get to the point where you're starting to swear at the screen. There's just white hot hatred for interrupting your flow just right there on the screen. And it is super effective. You start, once that happens to you like 3 times in a row, you're like, okay, fine, I'll memorize that keyboard shortcut. And if there isn't a keyboard shortcut, if you take the same action with the mouse 3 times in a row, it'll ask you if you do want a keyboard shortcut. It'll do that every 3 times you do that action with the mouse. So it leads you toward being more keyboard-centric with the tool. One of the things that is super important, if you got used to having the windows arranged a specific way, you don't want PhpStorm to tell you what the correct arrangement of your windows is, you can tell it how you want your windows to be arranged. Sometimes I like the terminal on the right. Whoops. And then you could just select the gear and tell it to move to the right. And then you're able to get more of the vertical scroll of your console on the screen at once. This is really effective if you also have a vertical portrait-oriented monitor. You can just get that nice console scroll on the side. Any one of these panels, you can move to any part of the screen. Somebody told me, and I have forgotten, but you can also stack the consoles on the side. The project menu and the structure menu that shows you the anatomy of your file that you're working on and anything that it might inherit. Those are naturally stacked, but you can move these things to different coordinates of the screen so you can stack what you want to stack. Additional resources. The PhpStorm blog is a great place to nerd out anything that they add that's new. For example, their automatic scanning of your composer file to find out if you're using PHP Code Sniffer. An automatic configuration of that was added this month. I personally recommend the JetBrains Toolbox because if you're like me and you use the early access program version of PhpStorm, the bleeding edge, the canary version of PhpStorm, it will automatically update that for you. And even if you're using the stable version, having something that automatically updates your PhpStorm without having to worry about, doing that manually is really helpful. That's everything I've got. But this wasn't the interesting part. Now is the interesting part for me. I want to hear from you. What are the weird things that you're going through, and what kind of questions do you have about PhpStorm? Or any tool.
So if you have a demo XDebug,
I'm sorry.
demo XDebug,
Can you demo XDebug?
I could if I launched a project for a client, and I don't think I should do that in a recording, but catch me afterwards and we can do that. We'll get to
share two of my favorite things with PhpStorm.
Yes, please.
So one is, I don't know how I missed it, but it changes color on the left-hand side with the line number to tell you which lines have changed.
Oh yeah, right.
So
Yes.
now, of course, it's completely visible. How did I miss it all this time? But it's nice
Right.
to see what you've changed just by looking inside of the gutter.
So for the recording, what was mentioned was the fact that when you make a modification in a file, on the left gutter,
Right.
it shows that change in color.
Yeah.
What's also interesting is that if you were to like right-click that color, you could tell that little change to undo itself without having to go through like the Git tool and reverting the entire file or something like that. That one change that you're fiddling around with, you're not sure if you want to keep or not,
Yeah.
you can just say, nope, let's revert that.
Oh, that's great. So it's basically doing a git discard chunk.
It's not even that. It's like the file knows that there's a change there,
Yeah.
and without having to interface with any kind of Git command or any kind of analogy to a patch or anything like that, just undo
Oh, that's great.
that, and then it reverts back.
And then the second one is the breakpoints. You can put conditions on them.
Ah, thank you. Yes, you can create that condition yourself. You can write your own if statement
Yep.
for that condition. But something I found that's super awesome recently is that you can tell it to break on a specific exception. Like if your code is breaking and you just want to break, you don't want it to break all the time. You don't want to break it based on a condition because you can't figure out the proper condition. Just whenever this specific exception, even if that exception is the generic exception, break then. Otherwise, don't bug me. Okay. Did you have a question, Green Shirt?
This is probably the worst question ever, but sometimes I do like the Git compare files and you recommend this great this and side by side.
Yeah.
Every now and then I'll go to do that like on certain projects and I don't even have the specific error, but it gives me some wingy error. Like, I can't find this and there's like no reason why because I can see both those bits. I know that it knows there's a difference.
Right.
But it throws some goofy error and it's like I don't understand and it just won't bring it up. You ever run into that?
I have ways to work around that you might be interested in hearing, because that comparison can be done on a file-by-file basis. That comparison can be done on a folder-by-folder basis, comparing the contents of, or a branch-by-branch basis. And what I have found is that if I go to the file list and I want to compare that specific file, I can press Command D on that file and then navigate to where the other file is to try to be as explicit as possible in telling it what I want to compare. And usually I do this when I'm trying to compare like my version of the file versus this other project that has it working properly. Like, what the heck has gone wrong here? And then I compare like file by file. So if you've done the thing where you select two files and you compare, maybe this is a way to work around that.
Can you go over setting a breakpoint that's not connected to any part of the code so that the XDebug just brings as possible to tell it?
Well, the simplest way to do that is to just, plop in an XDebug break right there in the code. That is as explicit as you could possibly be. If XDebug is working at all, and if it agrees that we're all speaking the same language, it will break there.
Is there any other way around? I usually will just define a variable that I'm going to later.
Yeah, I do that too. I usually create a variable called break that has the value of point, and then I break on that. Because as you probably know, breaking at the beginning of a method is sometimes difficult to do, and weird things happen sometimes. But if I ever am experiencing anything weird about how things are breaking, I do this. I put the xdebug_break in, because if that doesn't work, then I know something's really up.
So you can use xdebug. Sorry.
Well, we'll go here and then we'll go to you.
Oh, something I have not been able to figure out is I've been searching code to find where something is at, where
Yes.
something's defined, say. So I brought up a file, and I'm wanting to know where it is in the file system. And I can't, and I wanted to come up in the left, the project menu.
Yes.
And I can't.
Thank you for bringing this up. I love that you brought this up. So over here in the file menu, we do have the list of files, and there's, I don't know if it's very hidden, but it's not very well documented. Over here in the file menu, you can click the gear, and you can tell it to auto scroll from source. What auto scroll from source does is that when you open a file here, where you see the contents of the file, it will scroll to where that file is in the file list. So, for example, if I click on over to random entity controller, we see over on the left-hand side that the random entity controller is now highlighted. So, your scenario might be something like this. You know part of the name of the file. So you press Shift, and it opens the search for all the things. And so I know, looking at this code, that there's a file called something random. Here are all the things that are named random. I'm going to go to the random formatter, and then boom, file's open on the right, file is highlighted on the left. Wait, green,
Well, I
oh,
was going to say another way to do it.
oh, okay, go ahead.
And, well, what you can do is when you're in the file, is you press Option F1. Being in the file.
Oh.
Yeah, try hitting Option F1.
Option F1.
Yeah. So with there now you can press Enter and it show you the project view. But like go back to that menu, that context. So that's how you do that. But go back to the context menu again, like do the Option F1. And you can press F8 to see if you find it, or if you're in Windows, it'll open up Windows Explorer. And web browser is really cool. You can open it up if it's just like if it's an HTML file, it just opens up in your browser, which is kind of nice.
So, so with I've done the reveal and finder project view. So project view will show you in this left-hand side.
Yeah, they call that tab.
That's pretty cool.
So
Thank you.
I don't know about yours. I just do Option F1 Enter.
Yeah.
And it pops up, but the auto scroll is cool.
Yeah. A little bit extra work with that's good. I didn't know about that. Great.
So another really helpful tool that I found on larger projects where I really only need to focus in on a certain, maybe like a module or just a theme, is to create a custom scope.
Yes.
And then this way you can do like searches or like just like to-dos, not of the whole project, but just like focus on the scope, and it also cleans out the left navigation on
Right. Another great thing that scope does is when you're searching for something, you're not searching all of the things. You're just searching for that set of things that you care about.
Yeah, I want to take a close one to that. You can also integrate with your task management systems. So if you're using Jira or Pivotal Tracker or whatever, if you're on a big team, you can tell the scope to look up that task that's been assigned to you, and then you say, okay, I'm doing this task now. It'll create a new scope. You can have the option to create a new branch. Switch all the open files to a different set of open files for that particular task.
Yeah.
And then even commit messages.
Right.
You can have it give the task number and a short description of the task automatically when you're doing commit messages. And all this stuff happens with like 2 or 3 clicks.
That's really great when you got someone that sets that up for you.
So coding standards, what's the difference between Drupal and Drupal practice?
There is, if you search for them online, a very detailed definition about which things each coding standard does. And if you really wanted the answer to that, you would look up the actual rule sets themselves. But the way that I understood it is that Drupal is the coding standard for most Drupal modules. And Drupal practice is the coding standards that's more rigorous for developers to make sure that they are adherent to the way that things should be coded. The things that, like checking to see if things are properly injected, other kinds of good guidance for developers. I believe in the Drupal 7 era there was a module like Coder, maybe it was Coder, that had like the difference between the base level code standard formatting and the extra guidance that they would give developers. So that's what it mirrors. Green shirt, back to you.
Okay, so you got Xdebug and debug PHP, and sometimes I want to stay in my editor when I'm doing some JavaScript debugging, but
Yeah.
I end up switching over to the browser to do debugging in the browser. Is there, because I know Xdebug works in tandem with PhpStorm to debug PHP, but is there something that works in tandem with PhpStorm to debug JavaScript in PhpStorm?
Nothing that I've been happy with.
Okay.
Whenever I've been debugging JavaScript, I've used the web inspector itself. And the web inspector gets better every 6 weeks. So they recently added like early or eager evaluation in their inspectors to see, like, if you just hovered over a thing, what is the value of that thing that the JavaScript is giving you? So there's a lot of sugar there that I don't want to miss.
Just one more thing to point out. In that right gutter,
Yeah.
currently there are yellow tabs.
Yes,
There can also be red.
that's correct. If to see obvious errors.
To see obvious errors,
Syntax
you can
errors.
scroll down quickly to where the error is. And the other thing that you can do is say next error from the menu.
Oh yeah, yeah.
It brings you right to the actual problem. Let's say you're missing a comma after an array
Yeah.
or something. And then now it saves you tons of time. You're not searching, you're not scrolling, you just say next error.
Great.
So I work behind firewall, so I don't know if this could potentially be the problem, but when I updated from the 2016 version to 2018, started seeing every day getting a security certificate message that I have to accept like 10 times. That's
Yeah.
JetBrains, and that's every single day.
And that's probably a special scenario where you're probably getting the license for your tool from like a license server. Is that the scenario? Is that the reason why the
No, I'm not, because I did the offline
Okay.
license to make sure I didn't have to worry about that.
Okay. But the certificate message comes up every now and then?
Every day.
Yeah. Let's take that one offline. That one sounds like a special circumstance. I've never seen that. I haven't seen that before, and we do use a licensed server, and I'm not sure that our security situations are the same. But there's always Toolbox. You can blow away your current version of PhpStorm, install Toolbox, have Toolbox install PhpStorm for you, and then just like not have to worry about, did I install it properly ever again. Any other questions? Black.
I think PhpStorm is also in Homebrew.
I'm sorry, what?
I think PhpStorm is also in Homebrew, so if you're using Homebrew, it's like one command.
Oh, Homebrew. Yeah.
But I did have one more actual question. Another crazy one. Is a newer tool in PhpStorm or plugin that can help automate dependency injection?
Automate dependency injection? No, I've always done that by hand. And the fact that we got Composer into Drupal 8, and we used their style of dependency injection, makes it so that you do it one specific kind of way. Make sure you've got a controller that is a container injectable, and then got your create method. And if we were to try to apply Symfony 4 coding standards on Drupal 8 code in that context, we probably would run into more trouble than that's worth. But there is the Symfony Drupal Bridge plugin that I've never really tried to use, as well as a whole suite of Symfony plugins that are available for PhpStorm. And in fact, they recently revamped the way that you discover and install plugins for PhpStorm. That you might just want to take a look around and see what works. Okay.
I use that bridge all the time. It's great.
Oh yeah, good. So the bridge thing, it won't blow up your project. We've got at least one example. If you have any other questions, thank you for showing up. Come see me.